Hey guys, so my name is Gabby Shen, and I did my final project on gender oppression with an emphasis on women for Sociology 100. So before I start, let me read this one question. If a woman does the same job as a guy with the same amount of effort and has the same education or higher than him, why is she oppressed? Oppression is a type of injustice. The verb oppress can mean to keep someone down in a social sense, such as an authoritarian government might do in an oppressive society. It can also mean to mentally burden someone, such as with psychological weight of an oppressive idea. Women have been unjustly held back from achieving full equality for much of human history in many societies around the world. So, although we've come a long way since the 19th Amendment that granted women's rights to vote, women today are still oppressed in multiple ways. And as a society, we turn a blind eye to the oppression that physically and emotionally harm women as gender and as individuals. Not only are women financially oppressed, women are also socially and sexually oppressed in more than one circumstance in which men wouldn't be. So some research methods, I did statistics and I did them in different categories in wages, in domestic violence, and also in occupations. So I'm going to read a few of them here. Women account for 46% of labor force, but 59% of workers making less than $8 an hour. Only 53% of employers provide at least some replacement pay during periods of maternity leave. Women earned less than men in 99% of all occupations, and minority women face the far worse when it comes to equal pay. So, these are percentages of women's representation in those selected occupations, and as you can tell, it gets lower as I guess the requirement for schooling gets higher, and also the more prestigious it is, the percentage gets lower. 1 in 5 women will be a victim of rape or attempted rape in her lifetime. Women are more likely to be beaten, raped, or killed by a current or former partner than by any other person, which most studies estimating that 20 to 50% of women experience partner violence at some point in their lives. Let's see. Between 500,000 and 2 million people, the majority of them women and children, are trafficked annually into situations including prostitutions, forced labor, slavery, or servitude. Only 93 countries, have some legislative provision prohibiting trafficking in human beings. So some findings that I realized is that even though, like I said, oppression has been with us since the beginning of humanity. At a time, men and women worked together to meet basic needs. The men would go out hunting and foraging and all that stuff, and women would stay back and take care of the kids and all those other things. And that wasn't really the problem. The problem is, as time passed, the process led to women being seen as inferior to men in society, as it is within the works of men that profit was to be found. The creation of surplus also led to the creation of inheritance. The greater status of men meant that families were now traced through the male line, which necessitated the enforcement of female fidelity. Also, media has a huge influence on us and as a society, but especially for women, they portray us in a different way than they actually are. So this gives the younger generation a different view of how women should be versus how they actually are. There's many things that influence the gender oppressions. It's just like religious views, psychological views, and yeah. Actually, there's a study proven that there's no such thing as a preconception as a baby. A child is born with 100 billion brain cells, which is the most brain cells the child will ever have throughout life. These 100 billion cells grow about 100 trillion connections, most of which connections occur in the first 6 years of life. So the greatest time throughout life to influence a brain development is from conception to 6 years of age. So people don't grow up prejudiced. They don't grow up oppressing others. They are brought up that way. So I identified as a developmental theorist. I just believe that, like I stated previously, that there's no such thing as preconceived ideas. As a baby, you grow up and you go through these stages of life, and you experience things, and you gather that information, you keep it in your head, and that's when you get preconceived ideas of whatever that issue or whatever the idea is. So yeah. Some sociological concepts. I thought patriarchy and functionalist perspective best fit with gender oppressions. And so patriarchy is a system of society or government in which the father or eldest male is head of the family and descent is traced through the male line. Gender inequality and patriarchal institutions have long plagued society, leading to the disastrous global reality of gender injustice. The functionalist perspective on gender inequality or oppression suggests that gender inequalities exist as an efficient way to create a division of labor or a social system in which a particular segment of the population is clearly responsible for certain acts of labor and another segment is clearly responsible for other labor acts. So my call to action to you guys would be, although this has been around for centuries, we have made improvements. We have done a lot. The most important thing you can do is when it comes to gender oppressions is just to educate yourselves on the topic and issues at hand. It's one that's not talked about a lot. It's kind of overlooked very often, but if you see it or if you have experienced it yourself, please speak up. Whether that would be unfair treatment in a work environment, violence against women or even men, to even how men or women are treated and viewed. Just know about those things and speak up. There are actually already many organizations that are doing things. There's a lot of UN organizations. There's a lot of activists who are doing things, a lot of public figures who are speaking out about the issue. But one of my favorite nonprofit organizations would be Croquet Kids, and they specifically give women jobs in countries such as like Peru and Uganda, giving them better quality of life. So one last thing would be, I'm going to read a quote. Freedom cannot be achieved unless the women have been emancipated from all forms of oppression. Nelson Mandela. Understand and know at the end of the day we are human beings, all of us. Strip us down to the very core and you'll realize we all aren't that different. Compassion and love for others can seriously go miles. To change the world, it starts in us and even in our own homes. So these are my resources, and thank you for listening, guys. Have a good